Is your healing? Is your healing? Your healing? Is your healing? Is your
Did you realize the naturally matte surface and the shiny light reflections on the table? Imagine the surface would not be so shiny, or the oak grain would be hidden under a rough surface. Imagine you would put a lot of work into your woodworking project and would just mess it up before the finishing line by not caring about the last few feet in the race. Your wood surface in your woodworking project is your front yard. It's not just nice to have, it is the cherry of the cake. So in today's video we would like to share with you how to achieve this kind of surface prior to oiling. There are some secrets that we would like to expose and provide you a step-by-step guide. And no, it's not just sanding. There's much more behind it. So stay tuned and I will show you some of my secrets. In this video I will show you my way for sanding. But before we will start with the actual step-by-step guide for sanding, an overview helps to bring my steps into a wider context. Not everything that I do is necessarily what you should do. Maybe you have a different tool environment or other goals for how your wood surface should look like. Maybe you buy your wood already pre-planned. I buy the wood after it went through a first rough planing step, reduced to a thickness a little thicker than I needed. Blessed if you have your own planer, but I don't. But no problem, there's always a planer in many wood shops, or you buy the wood ready to use. The purpose of this first rough planing step is both eliminating the twist or arc of the boards while drying out and reducing the thickness to the desired dimension. My surface treatment in this video starts with boards that went through this first rough planing step. Let's talk about tools. The field is unbelievably wide, ranging from sandpaper on a cork block to huge stationary sanding machines. Most common in many professional or good hobby shops are stationary sanders, belt or disc sanders, used for smaller workpieces, and hand sanders, belt or circular sanders, used on wider workpieces. I'm on the lower end of the scale with my tools, using a good circular sander together with different sanding blocks and different grades of sanding paper. My target in many of my projects is exposing the wood grain to its full extent, which needs oiling and sanding. That means all surface defects need to be eliminated and the surface needs to be planed perfectly flat by sanding. But that goal is not universal. Some furniture style make use from a rough surface with cheddar marks on it. But here in this video I will show you my max planing and max grain exposing method using low-tech tools. One last thing needs to be mentioned in the overview: hand planing with a planer. Some woodworkers use hand planners to achieve amazing results for their surface. Really amazing. And when I say hand planner, I do not mean the old stuff in the workshop from your grandpa. A few hand tool companies reinvented the hand planning with amazing precision tools. I would love to have some of those and use them. Downside: if you want to achieve good results, you need to invest into real good gear. The normal stuff is not enough, and that is not cheap. Okay, let's take off. Let's get in motion. Step 1. Look at the workpiece and look for mechanical defects. And sand the material down until they are fully eliminated. Avoid local sanding. That might seem faster and easier, but will result in a not planar surface. I use a circular sander for that, or I sand by hand. Depending on the depth of the defect, start with a very low grit, 80 or 120. Move the circular sander in a grid pattern. You can use a hand block for that and do it manually. That takes a little longer, but the result will be the same. For the hand block sanding, which is a linear motion, versus the circular motion of the circular sander, constantly change the track and direction on the workpiece with a hand block. Step 2. Sanding with low grit leaves behind grinding marks in various directions. You need to look closely. They are very small, but should be eliminated because after oiling they are even more visible. Important. From now on, sanding direction is parallel to the grain, thus hand sanding. Still, vary constantly the track, but in any case the track must be parallel to the grain. Step 3 is optional. For some wood species like walnut, a really shiny, natural looking surface is possible. Look closely. For oak wood shown on the left, it does not really work in the same way. The grain is too coarse. The grain must be really fine, like walnut on the right side. So, step 3 is finish sanding with a higher grit. In detail, repeat step 2, which is hand sanding in grain direction, but this time use a higher grit, something like 200 to 320. If you want to bring the surface to the next level, and assuming you start with a rough pre-planked walnut board like that, you start with a circular sander and a grit of 80, sanding until every visible defect is eliminated in the wood. Proceeding with a hand sander and a grit of 150 in grain direction. Finally, smoothing with a hand sander and a grit of 320, also in grain direction. That is exactly what I did with the side table. Second example. If you can accept a not so perfect surface on an oak furniture, you will start with a circular sander and a grit of 120. Proceeding with the same grit of 120 with a hand sander, sanding in grain direction. In this case, you can leave out step 3. Okay, that is basically all. Well, some tips should be added here. Number 1, dealing with inner corners like here. Sanding always involves motion of the sanding machine or the sanding block. So no way of accessing the corners properly on the assembled workpiece. But the trick is easy. Just sand the single part before the assembly, at least the surface next to the corner. But the trick also comes with a downside. If you glue the finished surface, the squeeze out of the glue will mutilate the surface. Again, the solution is easy. Protect the surface with a blue tape, like you used to do it for painting. Some more insights about the blue tape thing will be covered in an extra video. Tip number 2, sanding of outer edges. Let's assume we have a very nice round edge routed with an edge router. Still, the machine leaves behind a surface not ready to go. So just do the sanding in the same grit stages like you do it for the planar surface, but do it by hand. Don't try to use a machine for that. Handcrafting comes from hand for a very good reason. I made very good experience to start with the edge sanding and do the planar surface sanding as the final step. That avoids sanding marks from the edge sanding on the less forgiving planar surfaces. Finally, tip number 3. What are your options for plated or laminated panels? For example, plywood with white melamine on it. The answer is simple, no options. These panels need to be treated like fully finished panels without any realistic possibility to hide mistakes in the surface. Well, do either not use them for your projects or treat the surface with extreme care. No corrective sanding is possible here. Well, you can try it, but it will look like ugly. Finally, here's the disclaimer. That is always something with health. But basically, it's nothing to mess around with. Dust is dangerous, especially when you have it in your lungs. In any case, a dust collector, or better, a collector system and good hand tools where you can attach them is first choice. If that is not possible, protect yourself with a mask of any kind. This is the absolute minimum. The more professional, the better. My workshop is in a warm climate, so I can leave open the big garage doors. That helps, but is no substitute for good personal protection equipment. Well, and after some time patting your surface, you will be surprised how easy it is to peel out the shiny side, like often in real life. I hope you enjoyed this video and found some tips and tricks that you did not know so far. And if you liked it, please give me a thumb up and maybe you consider subscribing too.